Prayer, very important.
Oh yes, sir.
In
very, very, very. Especially when you grow up traumatized. Can't stop talking about it.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, unfortunately, that we don't talk about enough. Overcoming childhood trauma. When you watch movies, you watch documentaries, all produced, by foreign production, you kind of try and see a lot of that. They attribute a lot of things happening to people in their adulthood as, being traumatized when they were children. And anything triggers trauma, really. You never know, because as we have said over and over on this program, every individual is different, and you never know what traumatizes who, how different children react to what. So you have to be very careful.
I think an indicator is for people to know, for instance, that when you tell someone something and the person responds in a particular way, and you tell another person the exact same thing, and this other person responds differently, each of them have sifted whatever they said through their years of experience, and the response is filtered through the generations, through every experience, every word they ever heard, every treatment, and all those things. Why am I the one doing all this special talk? Please, bring it on.
We have Miracle Ihoma, a clinical psychologist, who's here in the studio with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much
for coming on board to talk about this.
Let that be our first question. Why is it that when we tell somebody something, and we tell another person the exact same thing,
the
reactions are not always the same?
Yes, and I think you answered correctly already.
Oh, I did?
Yes, you
did. I'm not a psychologist.
Second
like you have many inside hustles.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. So I think that it's based on what is called internal filters. So the internal filters that we have that actually help us to filter information and then process it to determine what it then means to us. And it's the meaning we give to it that determines our response. And just like you rightly said, responses are different. So trauma is really not what happens to people. It is how they interpreted what happened to them. Yeah. And for example, they say about 6 or 7 internal filters that we have that we use to filter information, process things that happen to us, and their values, their beliefs, decisions, memories that we have, language, right? And even what we call meta programs. So for example, there are people who use what is called internal locus of control, and there are people who use external locus of control. Right, there are people who use away from motivation towards motivation. What's the difference? So somebody who uses towards motivation is motivated by what they are pursuing, what is in front of them, right? So the person can say that I want to succeed because I want to create wealth for my family. I want to leave, transgenerational wealth for my children and grandchildren. While somebody who is using away from motivation can say, I want to succeed because my dad told me when I was 5 that I wasn't going to turn out to be anybody. And that's their motivation. Or a teacher told me that I would never be able to speak good English. And that's really why I want to make sure that I speak good English. So their motivation is what is called away from. And that's an internal filter as well, right? So all of this is what determines at the end of the day how people respond to what happens to them on the external.
So it would also, okay, you want to ask a question, okay?
Yes, I was going to say that, in your line of work, and, we don't disclose this enough, I believe, how much, impact or how many instances have you had to work with, without disclosing, patients, whatever, confidentiality and all that. But how much, how bad is it in this part of the world, this childhood trauma situation? And I'm sure you've been working with adults more, but how bad is it?
It is bad, especially because awareness is low. People really don't. In fact, a lot of the times you see people displaying trauma response, and even when you tell them, they're like, "No, I'm not traumatized. I'm not traumatized." It just looks like I'm not. You know, it looks like it's a baggage. Right? It looks like if you see I'm traumatized, it means I have a mental health issue. So I don't want to accept that I'm traumatized, even though I'm displaying I'm traumatized. That's like somebody saying, I don't have malaria when you are displaying symptoms of malaria, right? Because there are a lot of people
has AIDS.
there are a lot of people who are actually displaying, trauma response in their behavior and what have you. But because they don't want to accept it, and maybe there's little awareness as well, people don't even know and all of that. But yes, it is something that is serious. Especially because awareness is low and a lot of people have not come to terms with it.
Okay, what are some of the symptoms? So at least people can have an idea. Someone watching you or listening right now, maybe later, can be able to deduce, okay, I think I've been doing my children injustice. I started to apologize to them. What are some of the symptoms?
Okay, for us parents?
Yes.
Okay.
No, not necessarily.
No, the general symptoms.
What are the symptoms of someone who has or is growing up with or living with childhood trauma right now?
Okay, there are varied symptoms, right? I'll mention a few. So we can start with emotions, right? How an individual is able to handle their emotions. So for somebody who is dealing with trauma, it's possible that they would have things like extreme emotional outbursts, right? Where you would see the situation and their emotional response is a bit overboard or overbloated in comparison with what has happened. That's because their response to that situation is coming from a past wound and not from what has happened. Do you get what I'm saying? So somebody, for example, can say, why are you speaking like you don't know anything? And then the person charges and begins to say, I know, what do you mean? And then, tries to prove that they know something or whatever it is. And there's an extreme emotional response to that simple statement. It actually tells us that there's more to that. It is most likely that the person is responding not to that person, but to something that has happened in their past that really triggered them. And that statement said by this person has reminded them of what happened in their past. So that could be one symptom of trauma. Another one could be attachment styles. Attachment style is how we form bond and intimacy in relationships, right? So somebody, for example, and there are 4 attachment styles. There is anxious attachment, where there is an unusual anxiety and fear of abandonment, where the person is scared that, this person is going to leave me or is going to abandon me, and because of that anxiety there is a needy or clingy behavior. So the person clinges too much, holds on too much to their partner or to people who are close to them because they are scared of losing that person. Most likely that is coming from somewhere. It's coming from maybe a childhood of rejection or neglect or something similar to that. And right now, the way their brain or nervous system has interpreted that is the only way to avoid what has happened to you in the past is to hold on very tightly. So you see things like suspicious behavior in those relationships where the person wants to know exactly what is going on, who are you talking to, because they just want to hold on too tightly. In fact, if you are not skilled, if you look at it from afar or from the outside, you can even think it's love. I say, wow, this lady or this guy loves their partner so much. Look at how much they are glued together. But that can be a trauma response. That type of attachment style that can be a trauma response is avoidant attachment style, where the individual is just disconnected. The individual is aloof, and in fact, left to them, they don't want to form intimate relationship because they are scared of intimacy. And that's most likely coming from somewhere. It's coming from a childhood of neglect as well, or a childhood where they saw divorce, separation, or those kind of things. That could have initiated that trauma response to really just avoid intimacy so that they won't experience what they saw their parents experience or something like that. So that's another symptom of trauma. There are physical symptoms as well. For example, if trauma could actually be seen in things like fatigue It could be seen in things like insomnia, where somebody is having difficulty sleeping. In cases of PTSD, for example, you could even have nightmares. You could even have intense flashbacks, and things like that, right? So those are some of the symptoms that an individual might actually be dealing with trauma.
No, go ahead.
This is on the one hand the individual now.
Yeah.
Now imagine the person having a child. What are the consequences of not dealing with this childhood trauma?
A lot of consequences because it's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect everybody around you. And if you were a parent, for example, there's something called generational or transgenerational trauma.
Wow.
Yes, and that is passing trauma from one generation to the next. In fact, it's interesting to even know that trauma, if not dealt with, can actually have genetic implications. So it could be structured within your DNA that you pass that trauma to your child, so that even though your child doesn't directly go through the same traumatic experience you went through, they could have the same symptoms you have or you had.
Wow.
Yes, that's how trauma can be. And in other cases, it is the fact that they will learn it by observation and modeling. So you model it, you will pass it in terms of your behavior. They will see that, oh, mom is afraid or dad is scared, and then they will grow up to become scared or afraid themselves. Or they would see that dad, is somebody who is detached, aloof, and then they will grow up and then also have that kind of relationships with other people as well. So trauma or trauma response and effect can be personal, but it's never private. Yeah, in the sense that it affects you personally, but the effects of it actually affect everybody around you.
Wow. And they say that trauma is like broken glass. It's difficult to fix. How do you, specialists like yourself, how do you help people to recalibrate, to identify that there's a problem in the first place? To be able to say that, oh, you're behaving like this, I think is because of some past trauma.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And then you help the person realign with their present realities and actually break free from the traumatic situations.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to start from, which is acknowledging that there is a problem. Because you can force a horse to river, you can't force it to drink. Determination must precede information. So you must actually have acknowledged that, okay, I have a problem before you can seek help. If not, it would be, pouring water on stones. So you have to first of all acknowledge and accept that there's a problem. Because it is after you have acknowledged that you can then begin to seek help to deal with that. Because acknowledgement comes with awareness. It means that, okay, I'm not aware that I have this issue. And in fact, that in itself goes a long way, because you can begin to catch yourself in certain situations where, okay, and now I'm displaying trauma response here. You can catch yourself in those instances and say, okay, no, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be saying this. So it starts by acknowledging and accepting it.
How easy is it to acknowledge or to first of all accept and acknowledge? How easy is it?
Well, it might not be easy, but you have to be...
So it is difficult for people to accept it?
Yes, it is.
Why?
It is difficult because, number one, it is it has some sort of stigma to it, to accept that, okay, I'm dealing with trauma. Not a lot of people want to accept it. In fact, and that comes from denial, right? Even though sometimes they know within themselves that, okay, I'm dealing with something here, they don't want to acknowledge on the outside because it makes them look weak and vulnerable. And not a lot of people are comfortable with vulnerability. Yeah, very few people are comfortable with being vulnerable and saying, okay, I have an issue that I need to deal with. But then they need to understand that if you don't come to that point of vulnerability, there is no way you can actually get better. So you have to accept it. It's part of being human. It's part of it. Awareness is a blessing. Vulnerability is a blessing. In fact, it takes courage. I've always said that it takes courage to be vulnerable. Weak people are never vulnerable. So vulnerability is not a weakness, actually. It's actually a strength, if you look at it.
I'd like you to expatiate, or rather, to underscore that a little further. And thank you, Joke, for asking that question of how do you begin? Because many people watching you right now, watching this program and listening to you right now, are wondering, is it possible that I have lived 40, 50, 60, maybe even 70 years of my life living this way.
Yeah.
And then I have been carrying this burden without knowing it.
Yeah.
Help someone, they have succeeded. They've done very well. They made a lot of money. They raised children. And then they have been living with this for so long.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to accept.
Yeah.
It didn't stop them from succeeding. It didn't stop them from all the achievements. But then there are many people around them that may have been at the receiving end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You know, somebody says success is what you have done compared to what you could have done. Yeah, in the sense that many times here people succeed, but maybe they could have done better. So it's just like somebody, for example, in school, you finish with a 2-1, but you could have finished, you know that you could have finished the first class. And even when you finish the first class, let's say 4.5, you know you could have done 4.8. But then there were certain circumstances or things that made you to fall short of that particular goal. So success is what you have done compared to what you could have done. So sometimes on the outside, it looks like people have succeeded. And that's why really it is only individuals that can really tell us if they have succeeded or not. Because, and that's why you see many successful people die by suicide. You are wondering, okay, you're successful, why are you killing yourself? Yeah, because, you know, success is actually subjective. You could see that he has a lot of money, but he's not satisfied. He is not fulfilled. He still feels like a vacuum in his heart. He feels like there's something missing. Yeah, and he's not satisfied with how he has lived his life. Yeah, so that's why success is subjective. Yeah, it means different things to different people. So it's possible that somebody has succeeded on the outside, but then they're not happy. Yeah, with how they have lived. They feel and they know that I could have done better in this area. Maybe in how I raised my children. Maybe in how I even pursued my career. Maybe I could have, you know, they know themselves, right? So it's about dealing with that denial and accepting, telling yourself the truth, the hard truth, the brutal truth that, okay, maybe I should have done better here, and maybe I should have done better in this area as well.
You answered your first question, but I want to offend some people. Some people just have to take pictures and post and get likes, and when they don't get those likes,
they're depressed.
It'd be like say something is happening. Is that also a trauma response?
It could be. It could be. It could be a trauma response, because one of the symptoms of trauma is it affects your self-esteem, low self-esteem.
Wow.
So it affects your self-worth, how you see yourself, how you perceive yourself.
So you need constant affirmation.
Yeah, so sometimes you need external validation.
Yeah.
And that's really why a lot of people are governed by likes and shares, because it makes them feel important. Like, oh, there are people who are watching me, people who are liking my posts. And when they're not getting that, it feels like they are failures. So it is coming from, and I've seen people, for example, who, and I'll give you an example of a trauma. Somebody can say, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't eat meat, we only ate fish. So now I have money, I must make sure we kill chicken in my house every day. That's trauma response. It sounds like, okay, but yeah, it might not be as significant as some others, but that's trauma response. Or somebody can say, when I was growing up, you know, I never had a phone. So now I must make sure I buy the latest iPhone.
At any given time.
At any given time.
Any cost.
That's a trauma response. Yeah. Or I didn't have enough clothes. So now I must make sure that I buy as much clothes.
Pepper them.
Exactly. That's trauma response as well. So yes, somebody who is seeking for likes, posting pictures, you know, for external validation on social media could be a trauma response actually.
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing is acknowledgement and acceptance.
Yes.
Then what?
Yeah, so the person must then differentiate between what happened and who they are. Because many times one of the things that makes a circumstance traumatizing is that there is an association between what has happened and who the person is. That means there's an association between event and identity. To say this event now defines who the person is. So the person can now make statements of identity like I am a failure, or I'm not good enough, you know, and things like that, or I cannot succeed, you know, or I cannot have a good relationship. Yeah, but you must be able to differentiate, and that's what I've always told people, and I learned from Reverend Sam Ademi. He spoke about, I think I read it in his book, Success is Who You Are, talked about the difference between success as a person and success as an event, and failure as a person and failure as an event. To be able to differentiate that I might succeed, I might fail as an event, it doesn't make me failure as a person. So things can happen in life. People should understand that in life things happen. It shouldn't define your existence or your identity. Yeah, so if anything happened to me, yeah, it's something that happened to me, but it doesn't define who I am. So being able to differentiate that can help that person process that trauma more effectively.
So that person needs to disconnect those two.
You need to disconnect the two, the event and who I am. Yeah, I failed an exam, it doesn't mean I'm a failure.
But how about people who were reinforced to them by the people they respect the most, their parents?
Yes.
That some negative thing like you never do well, or you never this, or you never that. How do they disconnect that?
That's why
Those are the people that give the best to them.
There's something called reparenting yourself. To say that, yes, you were parented by your parents, but it comes to a point where you need to begin to reparent yourself. Because once you become 18 and above, you are now an ancestor. Yeah. Because you now have the capacity to be a responsible member of the society.
Yeah.
And you also have the capacity to reproduce. And once you reproduce and have a child, they'll call you father.
Yeah.
So you can no longer be blaming your own issues on your own parents, because your own children will blame you for their own issues as well. So you need to now take responsibility for your life and begin to reparent yourself. To say, if my parents told me things that were unpleasant, I need to begin to tell myself things that are pleasant. To recondition my mind, recondition my nervous system to believe what I need to believe now. As I no longer need to believe what they told me, I need to believe what I need to believe. So if they told me I was good for nothing, I need to tell myself I am good for something. And repeat it so much to the point where, because that's how you came to even believe it in the first place. Yeah. You came to believe what they said because they repeatedly told you. So to disconnect from that, you also need to repeatedly tell yourself. Yeah. So that's how to begin to reparent yourself.
Okay.
That's great.
You have something?
That's great. So, sometimes it cuts deeper than what we've said. There's a lot of materialistic traumas here. I did not have it. I have more than growing up, so I must have. But what about, people that were abused, especially physical abuse, sexual abuse that we've been talking
seriously
about?
Hurts.
Yeah, seriously hurts. How do you begin to separate the fact that, they didn't tell me, they told me I will never do well. I begin to tell myself I'm a do well. It cuts deeper than that. So how do you begin to reorientate the mind to say that I'm better than that, I'm better than an abused person, I can succeed regardless of my situation before? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
Yeah, I do agree that it costs deeper than that in certain situations, and that's why there is something called therapy, where there are deeper work done with the individual or the client in therapy and all of that. But on the surface, all of that, and that's why there's something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which focuses on actually how people interpret situations, because most of it boils down to interpretation. And most of the work in therapy would be done to help the person to give what has happened a different meaning or interpretation. Yeah, that's what it all boils down to. To say that event actually affected how I now interpret situations, maybe how I now see men or see women or see myself, or even see sex or see whatever it is. So I now need to begin to reorientate myself to see it a bit differently. So that is a lot of work, right? But it is still the same process of reconfiguring your mind and begin to see it a bit differently from how it was sold to you.
Okay. So give an instance, right, where now a traumatized parent is also, of course, a parent raising children. Unfortunately, they remember the way they were raised and how they turned out. and they decided that, you know what, let me use the same strategy on my child. Maybe my child will also do better. Meanwhile, today, the English word is gentle parenting.
Yeah.
So, is there a marriage or correlation? Is there an error somewhere?
Yeah, in fact, I wrote an article one time, and the title of the article was "You Will Turn Out Like Your Parents." Yeah.
You turn out like
your parents.
Wow.
Yeah, and what I was trying to say is, because you must understand how that, and if people are going to be honest, even people listening to me right now, if you write down even 5 things you didn't like about what your parents or how your parents trained you, if you write them down, 5 things, you realize that most people have at least 1 or 2 of those 5 things in their own lives or in the way they are training their own children right now.
If not 5.
Yeah, if not 5. Yeah. So even though they don't like it, they are reproducing it. Why? Because that's all they have seen and heard all their life. So that's the only way they know how to parent. And that's how they are parenting that way.
Oh, wow. Anyway, let's just hope that someone has picked a thing or 2 here today to start reparenting yourself, as our guest has suggested. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Miracle Ohoma is a clinical psychologist. We appreciate your time and your thoughts.
All right, sir.
And please, keep up the good work. When we return, I don't know if I will be asking our next guest whether he was parenting right or not, but we'll find out from our Artist of the Week when we return.